I reside here in Coral Springs, Florida, which is Fort Lauderdale. For those of you who are from District 47, we just finished our contest, and I got to tell you, running 4 contests all in 1.5 days was a lot of work, but I'm very proud of what we did. Thank you, District 47, for showing the love. So, Lou Brown, take it away.
Thank you, Madam President. Welcome, fellow Toastmasters and guests. This meeting of online presenters has now begun. Guests, please note that in order to be a member of our club, you must be a current or former active member of Toastmasters International and have completed at least 6 speeches from either the traditional or Pathways programs. Or you must have substantive, relevant presentation experience that you demonstrate to us in a 3 to 5 minute speech delivered during one of our club meetings. All requests for membership are subject to board approval. If you have not already done so, please change your panel to ensure it shows your name and role if you have one. Right-click and select Rename to do so. We have members and oftentimes guests from many countries throughout the world. Thus, as a professional organization, we ask that you please be aware of language or word usage that may be considered offensive or otherwise insensitive due to cultural differences. Please note that we will be recording. Please note we are recording at the very moment. This meeting, your video and audio contributions may be used for our club marketing purposes. Please remember to mute your microphone when you are not speaking. Today we have a very special meeting featuring a guest speaker, Mr. Roger Courville. Please welcome back our club president for some brief remarks. Distinguished Toastmaster Lois Margolin.
Thank you, Lou. I love when he gets in and say that. Just kind of sits out. He's on. Thank you all for attending. We are in for a treat. We heard Roger, I don't know, what was it, a month and a half ago? And the first thing I said was, I want Roger back before my year is over. My year is over on June 30th. And I was so thankful to David for making this happen, and I was not going to miss this meeting for the world. Please welcome our founding president, our Toastmaster of the day, and a dear friend of mine, David Carr, DTM.
All right, thank you, Lois. Well, as you've all heard, this is a special program tonight, so if you're visiting for the first time, we'd encourage you to come back and see our regular meeting, a regular format. But this is not just a regular club. This is an extraordinary club. And we do extraordinary things here. We're going to do some of them tonight. We do have some ordinary business going on. There's going to be a little bit of table topics time near the end. And also, there is an induction of new members. Our VP of membership is authorized to virtually throw things at me if I forget to break for the induction of new members. But we have a special program. We do have some folks helping out in various capacities to help keep this meeting organized. We have a timer, Richard Durling. Richard, do you want to explain how you'll be performing your duties tonight?
Absolutely. As timer tonight, I will be flashing a green signal to let people know, it should come up, when they have reached the minimum time, a yellow signal at the intermediate time, and red signal when they should be wrapping up. My understanding is Roger is going to be getting the green signal at 30 minutes, the yellow signal at 35, and the red signal at 40. If those timings are wrong, I will correct them. I am also going to be doing table topics, and the green signal will be at 1 minute, the yellow signal at 1 minute 30 seconds, and the red signal at 2 minutes, at which time you have 30 seconds to wrap up. I thank you very much, David.
All right, thank you. Our R counter. Now, I did argue at some point for not having an R counter tonight. For some reason, I'm opposed to there being an R counter, but don't take it personally. Bridget, can you tell us how you'll be performing your duties tonight, what the R counter does?
Sure, and I was actually surprised that we're having an R counter, to be honest. My role is to highlight filler words. So whether that's an ah or an or a so, or anything that you use as a crutch word. Some folks use basically in every other sentence. And the way I see it is that a word should not be distracting. So I will be doing counting and filler words in general for most of the meeting, but I am very sure it's not going to be necessary for our guest speaker.
All right. Roger could tell you some stories about his theories about Oz maybe being emphasized more than they need to be. Come on. We have a grammarian also, Roxanne. Can you explain what the grammarian will be doing this evening? Roxanne, are you here?
That will help us. All right. So as grammarian, it's my responsibility to pay close attention to all speakers. I'm going to be listening carefully to language usage. I'll take note of improper language as well as any outstanding words, quotes, sayings, or thoughts. As grammarian, I'm also going to be introducing you to the word of the day. The word of the day today is forensics. And this is forensics, the noun. And the meaning, the art or study of argumentation and formal debate. Example would be, the premise is sound, with the right forensics, he could win. So it would include the structure of the content, the flair of the presentation, and the delivery. Not to be confused with forensic, which is an adjective and has to do with use in courts of law or other scientific study, but forensics.
Okay. Well done. Our watcher tonight is Sarah Gao. Sarah?
Hi, everyone. Watcher is a position that's very unique for online meetings. We don't have this role in our normal Toastmaster meetings. As a watcher, my job today is to watch carefully for items such as visual effects, body language, prompt, slides, background, framing, and video qualities. I'll give a report at the end of the meeting.
Thank you, Sarah. Our chat monitor, Tricia Smith.
Good evening. I'll be monitoring the chat for interesting topics, use of word of the day and theme, and I'll be reporting at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Okay, great. And let's see. Also, we do have a vote counter, which I guess will be mostly for table topics. Monica Tucker.
Hi, everyone. As vote counter, when the times are given and everybody qualifies, you can vote for who you thought was the best table topic speaker. Back to you, David.
All right. And Monica, you might want to add vote counter to your screen name if you get a chance. All right. Now it's time to start our workshop presentation and timer. This is blocked out for about 40 minutes. So I guess start giving us warnings at about 35 and lead up to there. Roger Courville has been a friend of this club since before there was a club. Back in 2017 at some point, I was trying to earn my DTM. I was a club coach to a club, and one of the ways you can get to be DTM is you nurse a club back to health. Well, they weren't getting back to health. And I had this other idea that I thought I might start a new club, an online club, something that was just starting to be recognized officially by Toastmasters International. I had learned something about online video presentation from Chris and Jim Gold, who are on the line tonight. They have a business called Geeks on Tour, where they run a weekly YouTube live show, and they've done a number of other fascinating things. I did a series of webinars for my district. I've also done them professionally. And so I was interested in this idea that video communication was becoming more commonplace in business, that we had these collaboration environments where you could spontaneously move from text chatting with somebody to doing a video call, that more business meetings were being conducted online, and so that there was a a general need for people to learn skills specific to presenting online. And when I asked around the Toastmasters world, who should I talk to about this topic, who knows about it, the only name that came back to me was Roger Courville. Roger Courville is the guy you got to talk to. And he very generously was an interview subject for an article I wrote for Forbes online back then that talked about this requirement and the need. And actually, I managed to sneak in a plug for this online presenters thing that I was starting. And he agreed to come and host a workshop when we were just starting to drum up business. And that first workshop, I think the topic of that workshop is probably pretty much the topic of what he's going to be presenting tonight. It's how to get people's attention, hold their attention in the online medium. Now, I have a little bit more formal presentation of Roger. I'm told that Roger Courville, CSP, has been called the Michael Jordan of virtual presentations. He's an award-winning speaker and author who brings evidence-based tactics to transforming boring webinars. His work includes working with organizations as diverse as Pfizer, FedEx, the Australia Institute of Training and Development, the American Management Association, US Bank, and others. And he loves habaneros, I'm told. And I don't even know what a habaneros is, but I believe it's some sort of Spanish food. You'll have to fill us in on that later. Roger, the stage is yours.
Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you happen to be in the world. And as we get rolling, David, you'll need to give me the permission to share my screen. That would be useful. And hey, welcome. I see some obviously some familiar faces in the audience and a bunch of new ones, and I'm really glad you're here. Today we're going to do something a little bit different because I'm not teaching like Toastmasters style presenting so much as to say talking about what I talk about and been in the industry that makes this kind of technology for 21 years, written a few books about how to present online, and that in $4 will get you a latte. So let me share my screen as soon as we've got some access there. Here we go. And away we go. So I want to start with a question. And my question is this. Does group chat or Twitter, meaning during a presentation or a virtual presentation, does group chat or Twitter encourage multitasking? Now, we're going to fire up a poll here. Thank you, David, for making those happen today. And we're going to fire up a poll here. And my question is kind of a yes, no. Just answer the first one. We don't need the second one this time around. So on the very first one, does the Twitter or group chat encourage multitasking? Answer yes or no. And then tell me why in a couple words in chat. Yes, because, or no, because. That's my opening question for you. And I'm going to give you just a sec. All right. And by the way, so you know, I'm not going to weigh in on this right away. We're going to come back to it in just a moment or two. All right, David, tell you what we'll do. Looks like some of you should be useful if more of you voted in the poll, but I see those chats coming in. Norman says, yes, because we can do more than one thing at a time and not just focus on the presentation. And Dr. Alexander says it becomes a little too easy to do something else, say, as I peek away from my CNN feed. Ooh, we're going to come back to that. Thank you. Jim says, no, there's no such thing as multitasking. Right. Gene says there's always a little wait time in between to do something else. Okay, so thank you, Dewey and Christian and David and Frank and Rachel and Chat Monitor. I always appreciate people whose first name is Chat. All right, so let me do this. Let me close up the poll, and we'll share the results out with you so you can kind of look around the virtual room. Now, here's what I want you to remember. today, I'm going to do this a little more like I would do in a corporate setting, since that's who my clients are, corporate training. And it's useful sometimes to remind the audience to look around the room. This is kind of like looking around the room virtually and going, what do I see? How many hands go up? Looks like we're at about 2 to 1, yes to no. Okay, so I will stop those results and we'll just keep on rolling. So like I said, we'll come back to that. Here's why. So one of the things that I study, as David mentioned, is attention. And I read science studies about this and stuff, but here's an interesting kind of cultural stat. Adweek and Harris did an evaluation of what people do while they're watching television, which is a number of things, right? Watching television, doing something else, and probably not surprisingly, surfing the internet is one of the things that people do. Now, interestingly enough, this is not just a male or female thing. And interestingly enough, this is not necessarily a generational thing. You with me? So people doing something else while watching television, I think, is a useful analogy when it comes to the nature of how people engage virtual seminars, which I would argue is a bit more like watching television than being in an in-person seminar. So let me share with you a couple things that we know from the world of adult learning. One of the things that we know in the world of adult learning is that lecture, talking at people, is one of the lowest efficacy forms of knowledge transfer relative to some form of experiential training. Now, you've heard this before, right? Unless you just fell off a log. You know that adults tend to be active learners better than passive learners, which leads me to then asking you this question. Why do most webinars, why do most of them look like this? When if we were presenting or connecting in person, what we would do would look more like this. Taking questions, saying, oh, interesting. Mohammed says, love this slide. Okay, and then you might say, I'll take a question now, or I'll pause and, can we put that on hold and we'll come back to that. Here is the driving question for today. If we're going from offline to online, a key question that I get asked all the time. In fact, by the way, I had my assistant do a quantitative analysis of the more than 20,000 questions I've been asked in webinars. And the number one question is, how do we engage an audience that we can't see? So if that's the issue, today I'm going to talk to you about how we adapt to a new medium. Because the center question, the thing that drives me, and I hope by the end of this few minutes time together is driving you, or something you think about more effectively, is how do we take the best of human connectedness from on-site to online? And the thing that I think is particularly important is to say, how do I approach a new medium in a new way? So today, here's how we're going to tackle that. We're going to deconstruct that opening sequence. Then I'm going to talk to you about designing interactions relative to your setup, and then delivering engagement beyond interaction. And I'll define those terms for you when we get there. Now, here's the thing. I got a couple extras for you. Some of you have this already, but I wrote a book called The Virtual Presenter's Playbook, one of the 4 books that I've written. And it's at thevirtualpresenter.com/online Toastmasters, online Toastmasters goodies. And I will chat out that link at the end of my time with you. And it'll be a hot link that'll take you right to that page, okay? So that is a bonus, by the way. I'm going to take that down tomorrow. So that will be available for you for 24 hours as a bonus for showing up. And that means if you, look right at the camera. If you're watching the recording, this is your lesson. Show up, don't watch recordings. Okay, so deconstruct the opening sequence. Here's something that we didn't do today, so I'm just going to have to describe it to you, because this is something I always do in a kind of typical presentation format, right? You're getting ready to launch your webinar, and I always start conversation in the hallway. Now, I'm going to give you the script that I use in just a moment, because one of the key questions that that's very high on that frequently asked questions list is, how do I get participants to interact? So what I do is I literally start early, right? Let's say the thing starts at 10 a.m. your local time, and I just come on early, 5 minutes early, 10 minutes early after people start filing into the room, and I go, hey, everybody, imagine you're walking into an in-person seminar, and there is some funny-looking guy standing at the front door saying hello and shaking hands. Well, if we do that for an in-person setting, why don't we do that for web seminars? And the answer is, well, sometimes that wouldn't be appropriate for some kinds of keynotes and that kind of thing. But for most of us who are doing training, we're going around the room and saying, hey, David, thanks for being here. And oh, Christian says, we try to get mass engagement and collaboration and try to have a shared experience. Good point. We're going to come back to that. So if one of our problems with typical expectations around webinars is talk at people for 45 minutes and then ask some questions, one of the most powerful things you can do, and the bar is really low, one of the most powerful things you can do is do something that breaks their state or expectations. So here are some of the things that I've done already. Let me walk you through this. We typically would start the conversation early in the hallway. Number 2, immediately set an expectation of connection. Now, there's a particular way I do that. Doesn't have to be the way that you do it, but what happens mentally when you use somebody's name? Well, not only do you get the attention of that person, but everybody else realizes that you're being live in real time. Chat says we do that with our work meetings, right? You with me? Here's a biggie. Interact more frequently than you do in an offline setting. I'm going to spare you some of the science. Read John Medina's book, Brain Rules. 2 things to remember about frequency of interaction. 1, there is no such thing as you should interact every 4 minutes in a web. No, that's baloney. Number 1, I want you to do it naturally. And number 2, I want you to remember that the duration of attention gets shorter as you go. You with me? Duration of attention gets shorter as you go. So you probably should interact more frequently toward the end than at the beginning. Here's the thing to do. Ask explicitly for participation or attention. Now, we kicked things off because I asked you a question that actually is going to relate to what we're talking about here. But I'm a big fan in a learning context to ask for something that is what's the word I'm looking for? Like a learning contract. Hey, we're going to be with each other for 3 hours today. I'm going to give you a break at exactly 75 minutes, and so you can check your email. So would you just pause that for a sec? And that's one of the ways that you might explicitly ask for attention. Here's why. Here is why I asked the question on Twitter the way that I did, which is to blend the interaction tools. We see polls and we see chat, but there's a powerful difference between the two. One of them gathers you quantitative differences, quantitative data, right? You voting in yes or no in that chat actually would show up in a report that someone could download after the fact. That could be really useful. It also, and you could use it like a mini survey, but it also doesn't necessarily help you gather qualitative feedback, as in guest said, Eve says this, and Mohammed says this, and Christian says this, and Tricia says this, right? Which could be very different. And finally, using participants' names is what we would do most of the time in an in-person setting if it was a seminar, right? If it's a learning kind of a thing. Now, let me add you one more. One of the things that I did that you may or may not have noticed was what I call thinking popcorn principle for polls, because one of those questions is, how long should I keep a poll open? We sometimes sit there and we beg and wait for that last answer to come in. But the truth is, I can't see you to know if you actually left your desk to go to the restroom. So what you will notice when you see polling results, when you're the presenter, is you'll see that they kind of come in terms of how frequently or how quickly they come in. You'll see that they come in kind of this standard deviation or bell curve. And what I do is think popcorn principle. And here's what I mean by that. When you put popcorn in the microwave, what do the instructions tell you? It says, don't wait till you hear the very last kernel pop or you're going to have burned it, right? It says, wait till it slows down. So to me, I think it's really useful for us to go, in terms of momentum, it's coming in. I'm not going to wait for those last few people. You may have a very specific context in which you need every person to vote. Vice President of Sales says, yeah, hey, everybody's got to vote. But generally, I wait till the thing kind of just starts slowing down, and I keep moving for the sake of the people who have voted, which at this point would be the majority. Now, here's another thing that's pretty common in the world of virtual presentations would be to somehow direct attention with drawing tools. Something that I do. By the way, here's a little bonus tip. I never use the drawing tools that are in Zoom, GoToWebinar, or WebEx, or whatever you're using. When you're in PowerPoint full screen mode, this little drawing pen is just like Control or Command P. Turns your pen into a pointer, turns it from you see the left-hand side, notice on the left-hand side where that arrow is that I drew. I turn my pointer into a pen to say, reward those who show up early by giving them a copy of your book, and Control or Command U turns it back to a pointer. That's what I do, because one day I can be in Zoom, the next day I'm in GoToWebinar, the next day I'm in something else. And that way you're also not fumbling to find the tool. And now, I already said this, pausing for questions naturally. So I'm not going to review this. You can go back and watch the recording if you want me to restate every single one of those. But let me get to a natural place of pausing by telling you what I think with regard to group chat or Twitter. What does science say about multitasking? There is no such thing. Well, as somebody said, that has gone up now, right? Here's the thing. The brain cannot technically multitask, and yet people are going to do it, right? We know from the science coming out of Hollywood, they study attention in movies, right? 2005, there was a study that looked at attention in movies that studied all of the blockbusters from 1935 to 2005, which were like from Gone with the Wind to Jaws to Star Wars and all of that. And you know what they found? There's no such thing as 100% attention. And by the way, I'm not Peter Jackson, and this isn't Lord of the Rings, so I'm going to assume that I have a harder time keeping your attention. So what they found is that all the famous movies used this thing they call a moment of urgency, which is something that happens that brings your attention back. And I'm going to come back to that in just a moment. Here's my point about group chat or Twitter. I always do it or encourage it because I would rather have people chatting and connecting on task and on topic than off topic, and more importantly, for reasons, other reasons that will come up just in a moment. So Brigitte says, I'm not a fan of Teams, although we use it at work quite a bit. Yep, I use it every single day. It's great for meetings. It's not maybe my favorite platform to present from, but I do presenter training on that, and it's good. So Jim says, told ya. All right, so now we know who it was that said the brain can't multitask. I don't see any questions. I see some, there's one from Graham. Graham says, how do you as a presenter keep tabs on the interaction? Do you use a second screen just for interaction, comments, and questions? I'm glad you asked. And the answer is yes, and I'll show you exactly what I do here in a moment. Tricia said, we do that with our work meeting services. We break up meetings into sections and have check-in questions to keep everybody engaged. Perfect. You'll notice that we're not through our time, and I paused for questions. Lewis says, do you prefer webinar or video conferencing format? You know what, Lewis? I think it depends on your audience, and I will tell you why. Dynamics with audiences change as you go from small to large, online just like offline. How many cameras can you effectively look at one time? The truth is, over I don't know what the number is for you. What I know is that it doesn't have to be very many before that's kind of useless, right? The dynamics change in person from 5 people to 15 people to 50 to 500. The same happens offline or online. And I think it's useful to remember that your style probably is going to need to evolve based on the nature of the presentation. Formality versus informality is one of those trade-offs. So let me take a sip of water. We'll hit number 2. Tamika says, should there be a presenter and moderator to manage chats? I don't know. Depends on how you like to manage it. I do exactly what I'm doing right here with 69 of you, as I do with 1,000. So we can talk about that more in a moment. Design interactions to your setup. So I do hours of stuff on design, including PowerPoint design and how the brain works and what studies have found, and because I'm kind of geeky about that kind of stuff. Here's one of the main things that relates to me, one of the biggest mistakes that presenters make. One is talking at people instead of talking with people, which is possible to do even if there's 1,000 people in the room. And the second is that we get carried away looking at our slides. Right? In person, we make eye contact with the audience, and then what do we do in person? Now, what do you do if you go to an in-person seminar and the presenter reads the slides and spends too much time looking over their shoulder looking at the slides? You'd go, oh, right? You would be awful. And yet, the temptation, I just literally smarty pantsed a response to somebody in my Facebook group, literally who said just a few days ago, who said, hey, what if you don't know your stuff and you need to look at your slides? I'm like, why don't you rehearse? There's an idea. So don't use your slides as a teleprompter would be my first thing, right? Know your stuff. Oh, not unlike what you do in Toastmasters, which is pretty awesome and part of why I love Toastmasters. Here's to answer the question that we used that came in a little earlier. Create a dashboard with your at-a-glance tools. Now, we know that part of the way pilots fly planes is to use both sight and instinct, but they also use a lot of instruments, which is particularly useful when it's dark or when it's foggy. Well, how do we do that online? Especially go back to the video conferencing question. What if I can't see everybody in the audience? What if I've got 50 videos up, and is it really useful to have 50 videos? No, I'm not reading your body language if there's 50 tiny little boxes. All these tools have things that could serve as a proxy, like looking at the dashboard of your car. So I open up chat, I open up, depending on the tool, I've just got some screenshots from GoToWebinar here, but to me, the configuration might be different depending on what platform I'm using, but an attention meter and a chat box and where do questions come in? Now notice, I took this particular screenshot over with my questions over top of PowerPoint. Yes, I actually do that if I'm presenting on one computer. Here's the way a friend of mine who does this all the time at GoToWebinar, she and I have done a lot of work. Well, there you go. Why? Because this is your dashboard. This is how I keep an eye on my audience. And so to do that, I think it's really useful to do that with 2 computers or monitors. I will chat out for you a link at the end that goes to one of my more popular blog posts that tells you exactly how I do that. But to me, the reason we need to do that is because of the power of a name. If you ever speak in person, yes, sometimes you stand up and you deliver like a TED Talk or a keynote or a lot of Toastmaster speeches. But most of the time, in most learning and development kinds of scenarios, we have table tents or name tags, and we go, oh, Gene, thank you for, good question, Gene. Why do we do that? Because that's how we create connection. Right? What are the 3 things we connect with really early in our own psychological development? Faces, voices, and our name. So what I do is, and I use multiple setups is the truth. My office is torn apart right now, which is why I've got this thing up behind me, because I'm literally up another screen and another PC. But I literally present from one. For me, my basic setup is to present from one computer, and I set up the other as my communication dashboard. I'll open up questions. I'll keep an eye on Twitter. I'll keep an eye on the chat box or on the participant list where I can see that hands go up or those kinds of things, depending on the situation. And then the other place where I might look at chat or run the poll or something like that. So one's my kind of communications command center, and one is the kind of the where I'm presenting. So I think of one as the outflow, what I'm presenting to, and the other one is the incoming from all of you, and that could be in a whole bunch of different places. So here's a key thing. And David, get ready with that poll. So here's something that you're not typically going to catch out of webinar companies, because they don't want you to think about it this way. They want you to think that Zoom or GoToWebinar or WebEx or Crowdcast or one of the 120 other vendors is like they got everything you possibly need. But I'm going to share with you two radically important things if you want to take human connection from on-site to online. The first is to understand the nature of your setup. So don't run the poll yet, David. What I want to do is I'm going to set the poll up by giving you the answers that have visual representations, and I want you to look at them, and I'll describe them. And then I want you to share with me all that apply with regard to the nature of what you experience or do in your life. I'm going to bet somebody here is retired. Somebody here is doing corporate presentations all day. So here's the scenario. The typical webinar scenario that these platforms are designed for tends to have everybody have a relationship with their computer, right? And oftentimes we think of interaction as, how do we think of interaction? We think of, oh, I'm going to put up a poll and the audience can say something to me. What is missing in most webinars, virtually all webinars, if I could round it off statistically, is what is the one of the more powerful parts of personal connection isn't audience to presenter, it's peer-to-peer, right? So a little earlier, somebody said, oh, we use Microsoft Office Teams. And somebody else said, oh yeah, I've done that. What just happened right there? Peer-to-peer. Peer-to-peer. That's there to me is an example of using open chat. Now here's the thing. I've actually done 2 tours in Australia. In fact, I'm not going to tell you my funny story when I was in Brisbane, but I'm glad we've got somebody here. But I've also keynoted for a conference where I'm sitting down and I'm on a big screen with a conference of people that are sitting in an audience, a typical audience. Now let me ask you this. If I said, hey, go vote on the poll, and everybody's sitting in the audience like this, how do you do that? How about scenarios where you are back from the camera? Can I use a drawing tool if I was standing back 6 feet from the camera? So A, B, C, or D, different relationships to your tools in your camera. You with me? And or E or F, which would be some kind of mixed scenario, as in I'm presenting to some people sitting at their desk and some people in a room, and then what's my response or what's my relationship? You with me? So David, fire up that poll, and I want you to tell me, poll coming up here momentarily, on that number 2, which setup scenario do you find yourself in? I want you to select all that apply. And so I just kind of described them there. You as a presenter are close to your tools in your camera, and the audience is close, which is probably most of us here tonight. You're close, they're distant. And if you've got more than one, this is a multiple choice or a multiple select, so you can select more than one. Which ones do you find yourself in? All right, coming on in. Carol says A and E. Carol, in this particular case, please contribute to the poll by clicking on the little radio button. That would be useful. Can't submit because the poll was already closed. It's still open on this end. David?
I think if people voted previously, their entry got wiped out when I relaunched it, but you should be able to vote.
Okay.
People are voting right now, so.
Oh, not open to me either. Okay. Hey, you know what?
I'm a co-host. Is that why it's not working?
Oh, I
yes.
For some reason, I don't know why Zoom does it that way, but.
Hosts and co-hosts don't vote. Yep. Okay, so let's do this.
You have to answer both questions to be able to submit.
Oh, got it. Well, there you go. Thank you. I just learned something because I don't usually run them next to each other, and that's okay. And by the way, here's the thing. When you present, I know that oftentimes the Toastmasters or keynoter sort of way puts a premium on performance, but most of the time just being real to me is a good chunk of how we should do this. So thank you again, and I'll share those results out with you. Of course, you know, most of us are in a scenario where we are like A, but look at that, look around the room. Presenter distant, 1 out of 7 of you. Doing something where I'm distant from the camera. So let me ask you this. If you wanted to touch the controls, what do? Well, the answer is you don't, unless you come up with some other kind of thing. All right, so let me stop sharing those, and I'm gonna keep on zipping here. So let me share with you a process of how to go from on-site or in-person to online. And to me, this is why I don't start with Zoom training or go to webinar training. We start with principles or practices that you can use in any context, because if you say, hey, I get really used to using a poll, but now you're in a different scenario and you're standing back from the camera, how are you going to run it? Well, maybe I got somebody else. That's part of thinking through how we need to do that. So here is my 3-step process. It's a simple process, but each piece can go deep. Each piece can go deep. Let me share with you. Analyze, map, discover. So this is based on a principle in sociology, which is that we notice what we lose before we notice what we gain. Socially, psychosocially, we notice what we lose before we notice what we gain. And when we move into a new medium, we start presenting from we go from in-person to online. The problem is we start going, oh, I'd rather be there in person. Well, of course, I'd rather be there in person. So here's what I do, and I'm going to give you the keys to the kingdom. When I work with a client, and I've done this with a Fortune 500 company, and I do this with one-on-one coaching with my coaching clients, I say, let's think through every single action or piece of what you do. How do you get introduced? How do you handle handouts? How do you, how do you walk on stage? Do you use PowerPoint? Do you use video? Do you use audio? How do you handle interactions? And by that, I mean, I distinguish between formal and informal. A formal interaction is, hey, I know when I get to this part of my program, what I do is I break people out into small groups. We're not going to do breakouts tonight, but we break people out into groups and say, turn to the people at your table and work on this, and then we'll talk about it in 5 minutes. That's formal. I think of formal is I know when I get to here, I do this. Informal is somebody goes, Tricia, thankfully shares that. She says, hey, we notice what we lose before we notice what we gain. That's the analysis phase. Then we take all of these little pieces and we begin to map or adapt them to the tools that we have. And I do it this way because I can be on Zoom one day and Zoom handles chat differently than the way GoToWebinar handles chat. And chat and questions in GoToWebinar are different than they're in WebEx. And if you get sold on trying to think about how I'm going to use one software and then you go to a different software, you're going to feel lost. But if you get the process nailed, you can go, I know exactly how to take what I've been doing and move it into a new space and ask the right questions of the software. We map it and adapt it. Now, here's the thing. Changing a medium always means that you gain something. And I don't want you to stop until you discover. Here's an analogy. You could write a story in a book, and you could write a story in a movie. And arguably, you could tell the same story in both media, right? But the discipline of telling it is very different in a book versus a movie. I don't think it's right or wrong. There's things you can do in a movie that you can't do in a book, and vice versa. Don't stop with your virtual presentation skills development until you figure out the things that you could do new or uniquely or better, not the least of which might be something like, how am I going to facilitate peer-to-peer interaction? How am I going to take some kind of scenario like this? And if I've got audience members that are all mixed and what I want to do is run a poll, maybe I need to get them to download GoToWebinar or Zoom on their phone, or use a different tool like Poll Anywhere, or Or, right, I've done every possible scenario, but here's the thing. If you do something in person and you know that's what works for you when you connect and communicate, and then you move online and you lose that, what happens? And this is the problem in the world of webinars. The problem in the world of webinars is that we take the least efficacious part of the human connection experience and move it online. And what do? We tend to talk over PowerPoint. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to chat out that link for you here in just a moment, because I'm going to zip through a final couple things, because I want to talk about delivering engagement. Michael says, I use 4 different media for video chats. I have favorites, but usually am not the one who makes the decision. And I find each one has different advantages as well as disadvantages. Yeah, beautiful. Exactly. Let me share with you something that I think is an important distinction. Now, technically, the words interaction and engagement are pretty darn close to meaning the same thing. But for the sake of amusing me for a moment, hang with me here. Let me define them slightly differently. Interaction, I want to define as something reciprocal. I say, put out a poll and you vote in the poll, or I ask a question and you type it into chat. To me, engagement is much more a cognitive thing, as in things we can do in terms of attention that may not be about how do I use drawing tools or polling questions or something like that. And here's what I want to do. I'm going to wrap up here with a couple little tactics that go from some of the more frequently asked questions and actually dig down a little more deeply with some tactics that I think will be useful for you. One is just asking the question, how do I stimulate mental responses even if there isn't an actual verbal or textual response? Now I'm going to share this with you quickly, because I'm going to give you a homework assignment. And I want you to go back and watch the most popular TED Talk anywhere in the world. Who is this? Do you remember? Do you know by sight? This is Sir Ken Robinson. As of at least a few weeks ago, 65 million views for his TED Talk, Do Schools Kill Creativity? And now thank you, Hetchy. Is it Hetzy? Thank you. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to watch and listen to it in a whole new way. Not very far into his, 18-minute TED Talk or however long it is, he says, I have an interesting education, or rather what I find is that everyone has got an interesting education. Don't you? Now, let me ask you this. In a TED Talk, which is kind of like a keynote, does he expect people to raise their hand and answer the question? Multiple times throughout, he uses another phrase. He closes something out and goes, am I right? There are a couple things that we know from the world of neurolinguistic programming. 2 things trip triggers in the brain. One are interrogatives, which is asking a question, and one is an imperative, which is delivering a command. So for me, if I say, look in the lower left-hand corner, what do you see? In fact, what do you see that's different about the communication that's happening in person versus the communication that's happening online? I think it's useful for us to remember that we need more than one tactic for connecting with people, because somebody, if they got up from their computer, or say their phone buzzed in their pocket and it was a note from the significant other, are they looking at your little drawing tool, which is directing attention? And the answer would be no. We have to assume they're looking away, right? So you can direct attention verbally. Hey, over on the right-hand side of your GoToWebinar viewer. Hey, down at the bottom of your Zoom viewer, find that little chat button. Look right at the camera. Those little commands go, mental trigger, trip a little mental trigger. So when we have something like this, I didn't have to tell you, or I should say, if you weren't watching, I didn't actually say out loud what the difference was between what was happening with the in-person communication versus if that same thing was happening online. But you would know what's going on, right? And by the way, if you wanted to know what's going on and you were checking email, what probably happens? Oh, come on back. Hey, anybody remember when the Rolling Stones hit the Ed Sullivan Show for the first time? Well, I'm a music documentary junkie, and I'm literally, this is Oregon Public Broadcasting, and this was on television, and this was an iPhone 3 picture I took, which is why it's all screwed up. But I'm watching this retrospective of the Ed Sullivan Show, and this is, what, October 1963 or 64 when the Rolling Stones appeared for the first time. And they're bopping along doing the, Mick Jagger swagger thing, and then, bam! And I thought, ooh, this is early in relative sense. This is early in television. And who, as I understand it, the Ed Sullivan Show studio wasn't that big, maybe 100 people or something like that. And what did Mick Jagger do? He makes eye contact with a whole bunch more people than were in the in-person audience. So here's a tactic from Jerry Wiseman's book called Presenting to Win. And it's all about in-person presentations, but he has this idea called finish the phrase. And one of the challenges when we present in this medium is that your right ear probably isn't the best part of what you want to share with people relative to what's the difference in engagement when this happens. Now, I did a study some years ago for the GoToWebinar people of 1,200 people, and I asked people what their expectations were of people on video. And the answer is they don't expect you to look like a professional newscaster. But here's the idea. If you want to get someone's attention, what's the difference between this and this? And the idea of finishing the phrase, like if you're in person and you make eye contact with somebody, to finish the thing that you're saying before you break eye contact and move on to somebody else. And the reason is because if you're scanning around or skipping around, it will appear shifty or untrustworthy. So in this particular case, when we're presenting online, looking at the camera feels weird, right? I mean, it just frankly feels weird. And so finish the phrase, and that paper is going to be there here in just a moment. All right, final piece. Turn up the mirth. And honestly, the pinned video that I used for watching the timer no longer was pinned, so I don't know what happened. So we should be pretty close. Turn up the mirth with the rule of 3. So this is humor. This is how you can punch up anything. Some of you probably know this, but it's really, the idea is 2 and then 1 of something. Real self-deprecating, big, small. Let me give you a practical example of how you can write this into your speeches, even if it's not your humor speech, right? Serious, ridiculous. Hey, today we're here to answer the important questions about the organization. How will our vision impact the world? How will we help you succeed with us? And why the heck can't we replace the one-ply toilet paper in the restrooms? Right? There's an example of that. We're all motivated by 3 things: death, sex, Starbucks. In his spare time, Roger works on the next book, volunteers at a homeless shelter, and plays guitar badly for any band unlucky enough to let him. So if you want a copy of the slides, you can send me an email at roger@forthehope.com. Let me share this final thing with you, and we'll call it good. One day in 1983 was not my time, as in not my time to go. I was driving a car that was literally torn into 2 pieces. That's the back half. These are scanned Polaroids that my mom took in 1983. That's the back half of the car, and that is the front half of the car. And believe it or not, there are no broken bones. Knocked me out cold. I still don't even remember anything. I have this blank spot in my memory. But I woke up in the hospital the next day, and I just realized I had been given a second chance. It's pretty easy in the world to get wrapped around the axle on all kinds of stuff, and there is a lot more important stuff than virtual presentations. Particularly poignant at this particular weird cultural moment, right? In my office, there hangs a sign that says you can't make footprints in the sands of time if you're sitting on your butt, and who wants to make butt prints in the sands of time? One of the things that I think is that if we just think about the things that we do naturally offline, whether it's starting the conversation in the hallway, blending how we use the tools, and then maybe even thinking beyond those tools, and thinking through how other people are engaging with the medium. So as we design our interactions into that, we can keep an eye on something. So Donna, I can hear Donna laugh. And if we analyze, map, and adapt and discover, one of the things that you'll figure out are there things that you can do better or uniquely in a new medium that you couldn't do in the old medium. Not right or wrong, different. And I think I'm a big fan of thinking, okay, so now how do we even go beyond just PowerPoint or Zoom tools to go, wait a minute, real human connection starts in the heart. And we have the opportunity, if not the privilege, of being able to be directors of attention. And as we get there, I have confidence that you will take your human connection to the next level, even when it's virtual. So with that, thank you. What an honor to serve. And I will say, Mr., Ms., Madam, Toastmasters, I don't know who I was turning it back to, but thank you for the honor of doing that. And there, as I get off the stage, I will drop those links into the chat.
Roger, we'd like to ask you to stick around for 5 minutes of Q&A.
Oh yeah, no, I'm hang out to the end of the meeting.
Timer, please time us for 5 minutes. Keep us honest. We'll try not to go beyond that. We do want to have time for a little bit of other business, but this has been fascinating and I don't want to cut it too short. Let's see. There are questions that have been going by in the chat, but I don't know. Does our chat monitor have questions that stood out to her that she'd like to relay on to us?
And by the way, you know what? You just take yourself off mute. I mean, we're family here, right? I think this is a little different context even than many of my corporate gigs. So
sure.
Entirely up to you. You get a question, give it a shout.
Well, just first, Tricia, are there questions in the chat that we should hit first? And then after that, we can ask people to unmute.
I've been very engaged with this presentation. Thank you so much. I've been making notes, the key points. I've been paying attention to the chat box. I think he's answered all of them.
Okay.
Maybe Christian?
Okay, Christian, you want to ask your question, Christian?
Hello, David. Roger, first of all, thank you so much for this presentation. I'm so happy I woke up for it because I've got a lot of takeaways. I wanted to know, with respect to questions or polls along an online presentation, is there a rule of thumb in about what is the limit not to go beyond, where audience gets tired, or is just depending on the presenter, the audience, and the flow of the presentation?
Yes, there's two parts to that. So literally one of my clients that I do some kind of like virtual emceeing for, they have a coach training practice and they had 3-day seminars that are 10 hours Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, moved it all online because everybody's shut down right now, right? You know what's amazing? Everybody gets to the end of the weekend going, yeah, I had my doubts about this virtual thing, and by the end, they're all like trading, making Facebook groups and saying, let's have reunions and stay in touch kind of thing, because they're really connecting. So here's the thing. You want to just think about how you manage breaks, keep people engaged. You know, there's a lot of breakouts and they do a lot of hands-on work because it's very seminar, and here's your workbook, and now we're going to put you in a breakout group, and here you're going to do this role play with this, you know, with this, these other two people, and then trade. And the answer is, you can amazingly go a long time when you help people manage their energy, but that's very different than the typical kind of webinar. So Christian, that's a great question. Again, I would say interact a little more frequently than you would offline, but if you put on your instructional designer hat, away you go. All right, Mohammed, take yourself off. Lois says, what's my favorite platform? Lois, my favorite platform is the one I'm getting paid to use. That is a true story. Ruth, I see your question, but somebody just unmuted. Was that Mohammed?
Yes, that was. Yeah. Thank you so much for your presentation. And, you know, I think what I enjoyed the most about it was kind of the vision, the visual that I got in my head of this fish kind of swimming the other way against the other schools of fish. Because I think a lot of us have kind of just been, you know, thrown into this pattern of presenting per the status quo of having our slides run and then ask for questions at the end.
Yeah.
Do you ever present like that, or is your presentation always according to the format that you depicted for us in one of your slides?
It varies. Most of the time, even when I keynote at conferences, I'm interactive. It may not be quite as interactive, but I'm a professional speaker. It's what I do for a living. And, most of my work is training, but even meeting planners, conference planners are even asking keynoters how they're going to be interactive, right? So the pure sage on the stage, stand and deliver kind of thing there are some speakers who are so out of this world good that you're just stunningly wrapped with attention. Mark Scherenbrock, don't let me forget, when I'm done here, I'll go find his name and type it into out of this world, right? I mean, just watch the guy who's just an amazing storyteller, doesn't use PowerPoint slides. That's okay. But by and large, I think most of us and again, my world being corporate communication, I think most of the time, I think it's useful to say, well, what would we do naturally? If we were in person, would you talk at people for 45 minutes and then take Q&A at the end? No, if somebody raised their hand in the middle, I might say, hey, that's a great question. I'm going to get to that in the next section. I might say, that's off topic. Can we get to that at the break? But, we wouldn't make people sit there like bumps on a log. It's the worst, crappiest part of the webinar industry because low-end Marcom managers run webinars for corporate companies and they don't study professional speaking. They teach people they just want to make sure it works. My humble opinion. I got one or three.
I think the point that you make is such a it's such a resounding point. So I'm in medicine, and public speaking isn't something that we're trained in.
Yeah.
And so the classic style of presentation that is unfortunately the norm is just kind of what we've grown up seeing and then doing.
Yep. I call that the Uncle Joe syndrome. Uncle Joe knows how to play golf. I don't know how to play golf. I learned from Uncle Joe, so I learned to hack too, because I didn't realize. Oh, thank you, Carol. Beautiful. Yeah, no, that's a great point. And to be fair, there are norms depending on your industry, right? And medical is one, and in some cases, like theological conferences, I know because I'm in seminary right now. One of the things that I think is useful to remember is that sometimes there are norms, but you know what? I mean, the paradigm of standing up and reading a paper to a live audience is old. That's a paradigm that developed with typewriters, and sadly, some industries are still, Muhammad says breach. Yeah. By the way, look in the chat. Carol put in Mark Scherenbrock's name. I don't know what he has available on his website, but that guy's one of the most stunningly amazing presenters that I've ever seen. More technical question. Do you use the video camera on the laptop? Do you use standalone video camera? Also, am I standing? Yes, I do stand. I use both. Well, right now I'm using an external camera. I use both because usually the one I use is the one in my Mac. Because it's as good as most anything else unless you go spend $400 or $500. I'm still working on that. Like if you saw my office right now, it's completely torn apart. So I'm figuring out my next thing because every once in a while we do that. This is a Jabra headset. No, it's not Bluetooth. It's USB. Do you stare at the camera or yourself? The camera. How do you make eye contact with your audience? By the way, here's another paradigm that sucks in the webinar industry. They call them simulated live events, and you go present at an event, and they want you to pre-record the event and then just manage chat live. And to me, my question, and I realize people do that because of pain avoidance, because they want everything to be perfect, which is ridiculous. But usually what I do in a kind of snarky way is I say, hey, if you went to an in-person seminar and you sat down in a big room and they played a video for 45 minutes and then took Q&A at the end, what would you think? You'd shoot somebody. Well, that's probably not the way to put it these days, but you know what I mean? I mean, it's like, wait a minute, no, people connect with people. I haven't. That's my. Andre says, how do you deal with hostile comments? Question, how do you deal with hostile comments? I'm serious. I've had people who say, I don't want to take Q&A in my webinar because what if somebody asks something about the competitor? And I'm like, well, what do you do if you're at a trade show and they ask about the competitor in front of everybody else? I mean, there's a soft skill to how you manage people, especially if you got a heckler or something like that. But I would start with what you know, and then say, how does it adapt?
Pardon me, Rick, does green mean we're at 5 minutes?
Yes, it does.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was looking for red. All right, that's okay.
All right, Ruth's been persistent. Client wants to use GoToWebinar and you've never delivered on it. What's the best way to learn it without having to get your own account? There's two things, Ruth. One, you could go get a free trial and therefore it's your own account, but it doesn't cost you anything. Second is you could ask the client to give you a license temporarily. So in GoToWebinar, by the way, when you have 5 licenses there's 5 people that are authorized to go in and create meetings and webinars and that kind of thing. And if they've got a license, they could take it away from Julie, give it to you. You could go in and play. They can set the permissions so you can't be messing with anybody else's stuff. Go in and use it and practice that way. But
Dewey has had his hand up for a little while. I don't know if he still has a question. He is unmuted at this time.
Who said that? Frank?
Dewey.
Dewey. Give me 2 seconds, Dewey. Frank asked a question about sharing.
Yeah, hi. You got me?
Yep.
Okay. I do an entertaining lecture about animation. When I do it live, it's part of me. I'm the show.
Yeah.
And then have a look at the screen and come back to me. I'm the show.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to emulate that. But as you know, and I'm guessing most of you people know, there's like a 3 or 4 button process to go back and forth from sharing the screen.
Yep.
To coming back to me.
Yep.
You got any? Yep. Is there anything else?
Yeah. So the trick, are you talking about with Zoom?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the trick is to use a Mac or PC.
Mac.
Okay. So on a Mac, the button immediately to the left of your space bar is the command button.
Yep.
When you hold down the command button and then tap on the tab button, a little window comes up and cycles through the open applications that you have. Applications and documents, and that's one way that you can select a different document or application. So the key is you go put PowerPoint in full screen mode, and then you can use that command tab, to find Zoom, go share the screen and go back to and then go select your full screen PowerPoint mode. And then when you want to go back, you command tab and go find, leave PowerPoint in full screen mode and then command tab and go back to Zoom and roll from there. That would probably be the main thing. Otherwise you're going to have to stop share, start share, stop share. I mean, in a sense, you're going to be doing that. All right. Last question from Dewey.
Thank you.
You had a question. Yeah, you bet.
You mentioned your email to you, but you said it very fast. Could it be put in chat so we could get it with a saved?
I did. And it is in chat. I'll put it in there again.
Okay.
And Ivan kindly dropped in the chat log as well. So
folks, we really do need to cut this off.
Yep.
Roger,
I'll hang out.
Virtual analogs, you would normally in an in-person meeting get something like this, which I'm sure you would treasure forever.
Believe it or not, I have this big trophy case with all these lanyards from when you speak at events, including the multiple Toastmasters conferences that I've spoken at. So.
Okay, all right, well, very good. Our topics master has been crowded out of this meeting, and our VP of membership is upset with me because we do need to do an induction of officers, not of new members. Elaine, the floor is yours, and we'll deal with anything else in overtime.
Once again, the evening calls for levity, so we've had it. He asked me to make sure that I got his attention so we do the induction. So in the last few minutes, we are fellow Toastmasters and honored guests. It is now our duty and privilege to induct new members into Online Presenters Toastmasters. Andrei Smolenko, Donna Knight, Anna Avila, Nikenji Warren Swan, and Ben Raichi is not here tonight, but he is rejoining our club. This is an important occasion both for these individuals and our club. As experienced Toastmasters and speakers, these individuals will enrich us as we strive to enrich them in the spirit of sharing and enjoyment. Together, we expand our effectiveness as dynamic leaders, presenters, communicators. Inductees, please raise your right hand, but unmute first. Raise your right hand to begin this Toastmaster pledge. Repeat after me, and each time I gesture to you, and at the end, affirm your pledge by saying, I will. So, inductees, when I gesture to you, say I and your name. So, inductees.
I, Ana Avila. I, Donna Knight.
And in the presence of fellow online presenters, repeat, in the presence
of
fellow online presenters, I pledge.
I pledge.
And now I'm going to read the list. To attend meetings regularly and prepare each assignment. To apply myself to the projects outlined in the Toastmasters education program. To participate actively in club activities. To evaluate others in a positive and constructive manner to build open and friendly relationships with my fellow members. And to bring other new members into the club so they can gain the benefits of Toastmasters. New members of Online Presenters affirm these promises saying, I will.
I will. I will.
And congratulations and welcome. OP members and honored guests, please unmute and give cheers and applause to our new inductees of Online Presenters.
Welcome.
Okay, well done. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And back to you, Toastmaster of the Day, David Carr.
All right. We do have a general evaluator. General Evaluator Tiger McAndy, you have 2 or 3 minutes to try and bring us home.
Let's make that 1 minute so we can still wrap up in time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, all I have to say is that was a most interesting meeting. Greatly appreciate the speaker and all the interaction. This club always is engaged, and I'm sure that we all learned and took away quite a bit from this meeting. I encourage all the guests, come back next week when we have a regular meeting so that you can see more how Online Presenters operates. And thank you all for coming. I will turn it back to our esteemed Toastmaster. And by the way, David, I counted 7 ums, so not too bad. You did a good job tonight.
Well, we did have an official counter. Do we hear from her briefly? Give us the disco version of an counters report.
Yeah, sorry. My Zoom is very slow right now, and I didn't want to reboot it in the middle of the meeting. So I'll be honest, Roger was so clean, there was nothing distracting about it. So there were very few people for me to actually do an count for. David, your favorite word is and in connecting between sentences. But other than that, very
so
few
what?
people spoke. And there you go. And I just got to say,
you're being nice. I have a daily podcast and I go back and listen to it and goes, wow, yeah, I go, right? I say that a lot.
I say so a
You're too
lot.
kind.
And I've been trying to catch myself from so. So I wasn't going to sit there and because I feel like I would have lost the gist of the presentation had I just started counting Oz. And again, my philosophy is it shouldn't be distracting, but nothing really sprung to mind, to be really honest. So thanks so much. Very little for me to do on this one.
Okay. Can we ask our watcher and grammarian just to shout out if they noticed anything particularly outrageously good or bad?
Grammarian, nothing to report. All good.
Okay. Sarah?
I would say I have an easy job as a watcher since a majority I just watch Roger himself. I think most presentation is really good, very concise and clean slides, very good lighting. Just the one personal opinion I would, to me, I think Roger's background is dark green and then your shirt is kind of greenish. Too, to me, it's not very pleasant to my eye, but it's a very personal opinion. I would recommend maybe like a white kind of a background to be clean.
Yeah, it's
But that's I'm sure it's different people perceive it differently. Back to you, David.
All right. So I win no prizes for keeping everything on time, but I'll turn it back to our president, Lois, for final words.
Thank you. So we are going to go 2 minutes over because I have a couple of announcements. My apologies. Usually I am cracking the whip to finish at 9, but here we go. Next week, is Marianne Grady still on the line? Marianne, if you're on the line, can you unmute yourself and say yes?
I'm here.
Okay, so we are going to have a really fun June 29th event, and we are changing it up. We are going to have what we call Table Topics Competition. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the group, and hopefully we can get really close to 100, and we're going to break them up into either 4, 5, or 6 groups, and everyone's going into a breakout room, and they're going to select a team name, they're going to select a team captain, and they are going to have table topics within that group. Then they're going to vote on their favorite table topic presenter, and that is the person who's going to represent that group. And then we're going to come back and we're going to have a table topic competition. Okay, and the winner actually is going to get a gift card. So in order to do that, Marianne, I had to take you off of the agenda as the Toast of the Day because it's so weird we're doing. But I am Toastmaster of the Day for next week. Would you please take that role for next week?
I think I'm an evaluator next week.
Would you rather switch? Which one would you rather have?
I'll keep the evaluator.
Okay, so we do need, making sure, yes, you are an evaluator. So Toastmaster of the Day, and Elaine, you want to be Toastmaster this week? Is that a yes? Okay, and we also have a speaking slot. So does somebody want to take a speaking slot? Otherwise, I will just open it up. I'm looking through the rooms right now. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open it up. And if we don't take it, well, then we'll just have more table topics next week. Roger, you were fabulous.
Graham raised his hand. Graham raised his hand. Graham.
Okay, Graham for speaking?
Yes, if I may.
Okay, so Graham is going to be my speaker and Elaine is going to be my Toastmaster of the Day. And thank you, Marianne, for understanding. But if you know anyone, the 29th of June is going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be different. It's going to be lively. You're going to be able to have a lot of personal interaction. And that is just what Roger was talking about. How do you interact with people? And we're going to be figuring this out. So Roger, thank you so much for an amazing presentation. It is 9:03. We are officially adjourned. For our guests, you can stay late and we'll have a little conversation afterwards so we get to know you better. Thank you again, Roger. You can all unmute.
Yay!
Woohoo!